Relatively nice day considering it's kind of cold and the wind's blowing. Looks like I gotta unfurl my flag there. It's a little bit chewed up. We're gonna try to keep you guys caught up on this van. Let's talk about a couple more things that we did do on it. Look how filthy it is.
What have you been up to?
I've been riding on a daydream.
First thing that I want to talk about is one of the changes that we made that you may have seen whenever I went to this wireless camera system on my truck that's also connected to the RV. We added a wired system to my son's van, so if you want to watch that entire video, I'll put a link up above here, a card. You can go see the entire video that covers all the installation of the truck, the camera on the RV, and the van. But I'm just going to highlight some of the stuff on the van here and what we did to make this camera work. So let's go to those clips and we'll come back. Okay guys, so now we're going to be doing the installation of the wired system, and the first thing you got to consider is don't just ignore the hood being up. That's something else. Where are you going to place these things? You got to remember that the monitor is relatively big. And in this case, we really don't want to hurt his van. We don't want to damage it in any way because it's a 1988. It only has, well, now it has 98,000 miles and it's, not rolled over, and it's in very good condition. So we don't want to do anything to really cause any negative effects to the van's value. So the monitor, as far as being mounted, seeing how it doesn't have antennas, can pretty much go anywhere, but then you've got to be concerned with the routing of the wire and the power wire, stuff like that, and the camera too. We got to be considered about where we're going to mount that. Okay, so without screwing up the van's interior any more than we have to as far as drilling holes, we did use the adhesive mount that it has. Again, the adhesive mount isn't made to go on the way that we have it here. But it works this way because whatever downward motion that this is, stressing on this mount is being stopped really by the dash. So that should help with the support. This is a soft metal, it's not plastic, and it's very pliable, so you can bend it, like in our case, to make the contours work for the mount. Now we know that we're not going to use the cigarette lighter adapter option, which is really nice to have if you've got an extra port. And basically this thing is the on-off button like I showed you in the unboxing. You just plug this into your cigarette lighter and turn it on or turn it off as needed. If you look at the harness, there's a lot of stuff here, a lot of wires. Now this is for options. Again, that's the one thing this company gives you, is a lot of options. Other than that wire and that wire, which are mandatory, and this for the camera, which is mandatory, you still have the option of having a reverse trigger wire or a couple of camera trigger wires. We're not going to do that. We're going to make this to where he can see behind him and check on his cargo. He does have a cargo carrier that he's going to have behind him to see if anything's falling off, and plus when he's backing up, how close he can get the stuff. Now we haven't chose a mounting point quite yet, but we're going to run the wire to the front. Again, this is the biggest disadvantage of a wired system, is that you have to route the wire from the rear of the vehicle to the front of the vehicle, or wherever the camera is mounted at. We went with a new location. As you can see here, it's mounted on the door, and the reason is because the roof is rounded up here and I couldn't really get a good angle, and also to where I think it would seal off very well. Actually, if it was a little bit further up on the roof, it would give you a good view behind, but the drip rail on the van would have caused an issue with the view looking down. Obviously he's going to have a very good angle this way, and the nice thing is in case you are doing a van like this, if you drill in this location and you just take the time and just kind of push the cable along, you can feed it all the way across here by twisting it and pushing it, and then it will drop, and you just kind of dangle it down until you get it to where it's coming out of one of these holes here. Okay, so we're all done. The camera is mounted up, and it's in a good place. It's in a really good place. He can see his door handle and parts of the trim down here, so that's going to help him as far as judging distance whenever he's backing up. Now, as far as with it pointed as far down as it is right now, you can see that, right? I mean, it looks like it's pointing straight down. You see the shadow back here? He still sees about this much of the shadow. That much of the shadow is still in his view from here, so you can get an idea how far away he is. Now, there's no backup lines on this because we don't have it set up as a backup camera. And again, you can see what he can see in the bottom of his screen. Now, even though it's on, you know, the one door, you can still see quite a bit on both sides of the van, which is what we were shooting for. All right, so once we got the camera installed, he's been really happy with it. So what else did we do to the van? He was having a problem with the van, and I mentioned this in a couple of videos that was going on, that we were vlogging about something else that we were doing. We had an issue where he was driving the van. He actually called me up. He goes, I'm on the side of the road. I think there's something wrong with my transmission. He says it just was like it started falling on its face, and the more I gave it gas, you know, it just didn't go anywhere. And he says, and I smelled something kind of funny. So I told him to go ahead and get a tow truck, have it towed home, which he did. And then I came home. We were on some sort of vacation, if I'm not mistaken, at that point. So when we came home, I checked it out. I took it around the block, and I ran it kind of hard, and I couldn't get it to duplicate. So I told him, I said, I think everything's okay. Well, like 2 days later, he drove the van the exact same route, and he experienced the same problem. So he called me up. He was on the side of the road, and I said, I'll be there in just a second. I drove up. We switched vehicles, and on the way home, I experienced it immediately. I hit the brakes, and it kind of released. So at that point, I knew he had a caliper hanging up, or he had a brake hose that was hanging up. So what I did at that point was replace all that stuff. I went ahead and put all new on. We went ahead and did the work on the back also. So right now the van has brakes that are going to go quite some time, which is good. It's very good that we went ahead and did that, you know, so that didn't happen to him when he's on the road. So after I did all that brake work, there's really nothing that was going on as far as the build until what we did for a couple of days here, and I'm going to try to cram it all on this video. If not, you may see a two-parter, but I think I can do it all on this video. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. And of course, when you see me on that video, I'm going to be much warmer than I am right now. Good morning, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of the van build series. This is going to pick up from quite some time ago. This is actually getting really close to being live, so hopefully when you're watching this, I've already got the other couple videos posted, and you'll get an idea of what's going on. But today we need to work on the interior, so let's go do it. All right, so I set up my truck because this is where we'll be cutting the wood at most likely. And as far as this van, he's kept it pretty clean. I'm so glad, because he does a good job. He wants it to be neat. And I forgot, there's something that I wanted to show you guys that we picked up, or he picked up I should say, and that's this cover. This thing is insulated, and they say that it helps with the temperature. It is kind of an expensive cover, so whenever he first said, oh, I bought that cover, I was a little bit concerned. But then once he received the cover, I'm like, oh, now I see why it's expensive, because that thing is sweet. Of course, it's custom fit, custom made, whatever you want to say. It's perfect. So there's a pouch here. You got this access to get to the plug itself. This is where you keep the cord. Yeah, it's all opened up in the right places for vents. As far as ventilation, you can see here. So what we're going to do is, I think we're going to tackle this first, because we have an idea of what we wanted to do, and we got to kind of get an idea of where we want to mount this and still allow a curtain to come down. Most likely we're going to be using this Harbor Freight packing blanket as a divider, and even though the seat is going to be in the way a little bit whenever it's in a reclined position, I think it's going to be the best thing to do, because if we put wood in here for a divider, you're not going to get this kind of lean out of the seats at all. They're going to be pretty much straight up and down. So what we'll do is we'll put some sort of a dowel or a framing of some kind up here, then mount the curtain rod holder or blanket holder, whatever it's going to be, to the roof as close as possible. For obvious reasons, we want to make sure that if he's in this thing at night, this thing will help keep it insulated front to rear, make it a little bit easier to keep it cool or hot, whatever you want to say, one way or the other. And also, as far as the divider, we want it to be dark. So as far as stealth camping, to some extent, he don't have to worry about, you know, people looking in. And if he's got lights on in the back or watching a TV show or something, you know, the light won't be coming through the gaps on the top. So again, trying to keep it dark in here. So we're going to mount this on some sort of a roller. Get it mounted on a board, or mount a board to the floor on a roller, and then from that point we can kind of build around this. So guys, if you remember, whenever we went up to the RV reclaim place or whatever, we found these tracks up there which would be perfect for this refrigerator slide. This is the way it normally looks, but we're just going to smash these down and connect these to a board, and then that refrigerator will sit on a board. Alright, so we've got the slider in. It does drag the carpet a little bit, as you can see here, and we've got a couple of pieces that will help it from moving on the wood. The slider is pretty stiff, but it does a good job. I mean, it's better than trying to slide this freezer by itself without a slider, because we tried that out too. And as far as him accessing it, it's not a big deal. I mean, you can see he can get in here just fine. And even with it in, if we didn't put a desk over top of this or anything, he could access it right where it's at now. So that part is pretty much finished. And again, the sliding part here, we might be able to add some kind of plastic pieces to the underside of the metal tracks to help them slide across the carpet. We'll have to look at that at a later time. You guys know that they make those carpet sliders for furniture. Maybe we can put one of those on the bottom of the tracks. So now we're on to the next step, and that's to mount the commode or the toilet on a board with its mounting flange and make it slide. But it's not going to slide like this. It's just going to slide on the carpet, on the wood that it's mounted on. We will mount it on a piece of wood, but we want to make it to where it can come out and turn and twist and everything else, and then we'll start building a cabinet all around that. Of course, the thing we want to do today, if we can get to it, is put that big piece of paneling on this wall here. But it's kind of warm. We got the fan running, but so far so good. All right, so here you see the Thetford toilet, and this is a very, very nice one. This is what they call the Curve. I'll put the link down below. I've talked about this in the past, and I'll also put the link for the floor plate. And what that does is allow this thing to lock into something. Now, all we're wanting it to do is to lock into a piece of plywood that's going to set in the van and be able to slide in and out of the van pretty freely. Now, the thing with that is, if he goes somewhere and he's out in the desert, or he's out boondocking somewhere in the woods, and he doesn't want to have his commode inside the van, he'll be able to pick it up and it'll be mounted on that piece of wood, and he can set it outside somewhere inside a tent or whatever, and it'll give him a little bit more space. And of course the toilet then can, you know, go a couple more days before it needs changed. However, this thing is really, really nice. If you guys haven't checked these things out yet, they've got a nice design to them. I believe the top holds 4 gallons of fresh water, and then the bottom holds 5 gallons of black. And what happens is when you push the button, it flushes for you. This is the fill here. You fill that up with the fresh water, and yeah, this will fill the bowl and put the amount of water in it that you want, and then you pull the lever to flush it, and or rinse the bowl at the same time, and that's it. And then of course when you go to dump it, I know this probably isn't that exciting. You guys have seen these before, I'm sure. You just pull this lever back here to release it. I'm going to try to do this with one hand, and that allows the top to come off. And then here's your bottom. You take this wherever you need to go, carry it into a public restroom if you want to, And then once you're in the restroom, at that point, you want to take this lid off. This is a measuring cup also for the chemical that you want to put in here to keep it from smelling. And then you just tilt this down like this, and then put it over the commode. And then as you're doing this, you just push this button here, and that gives vacuum. It releases the vacuum to help all of it to come out. And then you can flush it out a few times. You just turn this here, which this is the flush mechanism. You can fill this with water and then close it back up again and then slosh it around, of course with the lid on, but you get the idea. All right, so here's the mounted board, and it does help quite a bit as far as the weight and everything. And the nice thing is this is going to be enclosed at some point in a cabinet, and again, he'll just pull this out and point it maybe to the front of the van, and then use it. You know, the door can be closed and he can use it and everything will go smooth. As far as it sliding around, it's a plus and a minus. Maybe we don't want it to slide around because it'll stay put a little bit better. However, whenever he wants to slide it out, you know, it'd be nicer if it moved a little bit easier, because right now there's no, you know, there's not 4 gallons of water in here. So that is going to add some weight, of course. But now we can start on adding the board to the wall here, and then maybe start framing up this cabinet too. All right, so we've got the paneling up on the wall like you see, and looks like there's already a bug in here. Boom, boom, boom. Now what we've got to do is actually lay out where we want the cabinets to be at, or how the cabinets are to be built. And of course we're going to be building it around this commode, porta potty, whatever you want to call it. And then we also have to build some sort of a cabinet over top of the refrigerator up there. We're still debating on that, how we'd like to do that, but we want to make sure there's still sort of an aisleway here, and also that we can take this porta potty and pull it out and make the corner. And also, these cabinets have to house that water tank and the water pump. That's going to be in here. We also have to make sure that the drain, the hose for the water tank can be accessed, so he can drain it out if it's going to be, you know, below a certain temperature, which they have a simple hose set up on there now, and I suppose that would work. That's not a bad design. It's just a hose pipe end on the end of it that you just take off and allow it to drain out. So maybe we'll try to figure out a way to do that, but we do have to figure out maybe even a place to put his little sink in here. Again, all this is just spitballing at this point, but let us get to work here. All right, so you can see the basic outline what we've got here. I pre-drilled, and then we went right into the floor of the van with these screws here. If you guys want to take note of that, so you know what we're using. And these things are pretty brutal. I mean, they've got a real steep lever on it, and then you have a self-tapper that helps, and then you have these locking ribs here. So they run in with a T25 bit. But just got done sweeping up. We're going to stop for the day. You've seen everything we did. Got a little time lapse of some of this stuff. I'm not a carpenter. I've never claimed to be a carpenter, and I know that none of this is right. However, it's going to do the job, especially once we get the supporting wood on it. We're going to be making a second shelf here for the water tank to go, and we want to make sure that water tank can slide out easily in case there's a leak or something like that. So we'll have some sort of a door system that will allow that. Not exactly sure how how it's going to be done, but we'll get the countertop on this and that water tank in. I mean, that's a lot of water, and we were discussing that quite a bit off camera with him going with portable water, or if he had a way to fill that water tank and then hook up his water pump. I think we'd rather do that, or he'd rather do that. So yeah, that's it. Let's see what happens tomorrow.